Was Grandma's secret recipe worth destroying our family? I always thought family drama was something that happened to other people. You know, the kind of thing you hear about at work or see on some reality show, siblings screaming, parents taking sides, cousins never speaking again. My family wasn't like that. We had our quirks, sure, but on the surface, we were what everyone envied: loud Sunday dinners, holiday gatherings that stretched late into the night, laughter echoing through hallways that smelled of roasted garlic and fresh bread. I grew up believing that no matter what, we were solid. We had each other's backs. But life has a cruel way of teaching you that sometimes the things you trust the most are the very things that will blindside you. And the feud that tore my family apart wasn't about money. It wasn't about inheritance. It wasn't even about betrayal in the traditional sense. No, ours started with something much smaller, something so seemingly insignificant that when I look back, I still can't believe it was the spark that burned everything down. It all started with a recipe. My grandmother, Nora, had this legendary apple pie. I know that sounds cliché, but it wasn't just dessert, it was tradition, history, and pride baked into a flaky crust. People came from all over town during the holidays just hoping to get a slice. She'd bring it to church bake sales, school fundraisers, even funerals. Everyone swore it was magic. The filling had the perfect balance of tart and sweet, the crust melted in your mouth, and there was this mysterious spice that no one could quite identify. She guarded that recipe with her life. Not even my mom, her own daughter, knew it. The only time you saw her pie in progress was if you happened to be in her kitchen while she worked, and even then she'd shoo you away if she caught you staring too closely. Family secret, she'd always say with a wink, but we all assumed that someday she'd pass it down. When she passed away, we weren't just grieving her, we were grieving the loss of that pie. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but food is memory, and losing that recipe felt like losing a piece of her all over again. The funeral had barely ended when my cousin Theo dropped the first bombshell. He claimed that Grandma had given him the recipe. Privately. Years ago. We were sitting in the living room, the air heavy with grief and silence, when he said it. "I guess I should tell you all now," he murmured, twirling the ring on his finger like he always did when nervous. "Grandma gave me the apple pie recipe before she passed. She said she trusted me with it." The room went still. My mom blinked in disbelief. My uncle scoffed. My aunt, who had been holding a tissue to her nose, froze mid-blow. "What do you mean she gave it to you?" my mom asked sharply. "Why would she only give it to you?" Theo shrugged, feigning humility, but I could see the pride shining through. "She said I was the only one who cared enough to carry it forward. That I'd honor it." The silence turned to murmurs, then murmurs turned to raised voices. My aunt accused Theo of lying. My uncle said it wasn't fair, that the recipe belonged to everyone. My mom, usually the calmest, demanded proof. Theo swore he had it written down, sealed in an envelope with Grandma's handwriting. And then, like the fool he is, he promised to bring it next time we gathered. I should have known right then that nothing would ever be the same. The following week, we met again at my aunt's house under the pretense of sorting through Grandma's belongings. But the truth? Everyone just wanted to see that recipe. Theo arrived late, clutching a worn envelope like it was the crown jewels. He made a big show of unsealing it slowly, laying the yellowed piece of paper on the dining table. And there it was, the fabled apple pie recipe, scrawled in Grandma's messy cursive. Everyone leaned in, desperate to see. I'll never forget the way my mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. My aunt muttered something under her breath. And my uncle? He laughed. "Are you kidding me?" he barked. "This is a joke. Look at that handwriting, it doesn't even look like Mom's." Theo bristled. "It's real. She gave it to me." "No," my uncle snapped. "You forged this. You're trying to make yourself the keeper of the legacy. Admit it." And just like that, the accusations flew. Forgery. Manipulation. Lies. My aunt started crying, saying Grandma would never pick favorites like that. My mom, torn between disbelief and hope, asked Theo to make the pie for us to prove it. If he had the recipe, the pie would taste the same. That was the night the lines were drawn. Theo baked the pie. We all gathered around, forks in hand, waiting. The first bite was wrong. Close, but not quite. The crust was too thick, the filling a touch too sweet. And that mysterious spice? Missing entirely. The disappointment was palpable. My aunt slammed her fork down. I knew it. You made this up. Theo turned red, insisting that maybe he misread something, that Grandma had told him there was a trick to it. But the damage was done. Nobody believed him anymore. From there, things unraveled fast. Every family gathering became a battlefield. My mom accused Theo of exploiting grief. My uncle swore he'd never speak to him again. My aunt spread rumors around town that Theo had stolen recipes from other people too. And me? I started noticing something strange. Whenever Grandma's pie came up, my mom grew unusually quiet. She'd fold her hands in her lap, stare down at her nails, and say nothing. At first, I thought it was grief. But then one night, long after everyone had left, I caught her in the kitchen flipping through an old notebook with pages so worn they looked ready to crumble. When she saw me, she jumped, slamming it shut. Go to bed, she said quickly. But I'd seen it. The faded words on the page. The title written in Grandma's handwriting, apple pie. That's when I realized, my mom had the real recipe. But instead of telling anyone, she was hiding it. And that secret? That's what turned our family feud into a war. If chapter 1 of this mess was Theo waving around that fake recipe, chapter 2 began the night I caught my mom hiding the real one. I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet without Grandma's humming drifting through the halls, her voice faint and sweet as she stirred something on the stove. I wandered into the kitchen to grab water, but there she was, my mom, sitting at the table with a battered notebook. The overhead light cast sharp shadows across her face, and she looked more haunted than I'd ever seen her. When she slammed the book shut, I knew immediately she was hiding something. And when I saw the faded word apple pie on the cover, I knew exactly what it was. Mom, I whispered. You have it. Her lips pressed into a tight line. Go back to bed. You have the recipe, I pushed. My voice was shaking. Why didn't you tell anyone? She sighed, shoulders sagging, like the weight of the world had settled on her. Because some things are better kept secret. I didn't understand. We were tearing ourselves apart over this. Theo had made a fool of himself. My aunt and uncle weren't speaking. Every dinner turned into a shouting match. And here she was, sitting on the one thing that could end it all. Why? I asked again. She looked up at me then, her eyes red, and I swear I saw something almost guilty in them. Because it isn't just a recipe. It's more than that. But she wouldn't say another word. She tucked the notebook away, brushed past me, and went to bed. From that moment on, I couldn't stop thinking about it. What did she mean it was more than just a recipe? The next family gathering was at my uncle's place. We were supposed to be sorting through boxes of Grandma's old things, but it quickly turned into another round of screaming over Theo's forged pie attempt. My aunt accused him again of lying. My uncle swore he'd cut him out of the family for good. And Theo, red-faced and desperate, swore he'd get it right next time if we just gave him another chance. I couldn't take it anymore. So I said it. My mom has the recipe. The room went dead silent. My mother froze, a stack of photo albums in her hands. She looked at me like I had stabbed her in the back. My aunt's jaw dropped. My uncle's eyes narrowed, and Theo looked like I'd just betrayed him personally. What? My aunt demanded. She has it? My mom shook her head quickly. That's not true. But it was too late. The seed was planted. Don't lie, Anna, my uncle said coldly. If you've been hiding it all this time. I'm not hiding anything, she snapped. but her voice cracked, and everyone heard it. Theo's face twisted. So you let me make a fool of myself? You sat there and let me claim I had it while you kept the real thing locked away? Because it's not what you think, my mom blurted, her hands trembling. What do you mean? I asked quietly, hoping she'd finally tell us the truth. But she didn't. She just shook her head, muttered something about respecting Grandma's wishes, and stormed out. That night was the last time we were all in the same room without someone slamming a door. The feud escalated from whispers to open war. My aunt started calling around town, telling anyone who would listen that my mom was hoarding Grandma's legacy. My uncle threatened to lawyer up, claiming the recipe was family property and should be shared equally. Theo went on social media, ranting about how he'd been humiliated, painting himself as the victim of a family conspiracy. And me? I was stuck in the middle, watching everything fall apart. I wanted to believe my mom. I wanted to think there was some noble reason she was keeping the recipe secret. But then I found out something that shook me even more. A week later, I went digging through the attic for an old photo album. Buried under piles of Christmas decorations and broken toys, I found another notebook. Smaller, with Grandma's handwriting on the front. Inside, tucked between recipes for casseroles and jams, was a letter. It was addressed to my mom. I shouldn't have read it, but I did. And what I read made my stomach drop. Anna, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And if I'm gone, I need you to understand something about the pie. It isn't just a recipe. It's a story. A secret. One that could hurt this family if it ever got out. You must protect it. Promise me you'll never let anyone else see it. Not even your brothers and sister. Not even the kids. Some traditions are meant to die with us. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding harder each time. What could possibly be so dangerous about a pie recipe? I stuffed the notebook back where I found it, but the words burned in my mind. Protect it. Never let anyone see it. And suddenly, I understood why my mom was being so cagey. But my family didn't know that letter existed. All they saw was betrayal. And soon, the shouting matches turned into ultimatums. My aunt stopped inviting us over. My uncle sent threatening texts about legal action. Theo blocked me on everything and started selling his own grandma's apple pie at the local farmer's market, a cheap imitation that everyone whispered was disgusting. It should have ended there. A broken family, simmering resentment, a recipe buried in secrecy. But then my aunt did something that changed everything. She hired a private investigator. At first, I thought it was insane. Who hires a PI over a pie? But she was convinced there was more to the story. And she was right. The investigator dug into Grandma's past. Bank records, property deeds, old letters. And what he found had nothing to do with food. It turned out Grandma hadn't just been a sweet old lady who baked for the church. In her younger years, she'd been involved in something shady. Something that tied directly to the secret spice in that pie. When my aunt confronted us with the report at a family meeting, jaws dropped. My mom went pale. And I, sitting there, clutching the edge of my chair, realized that the feud wasn't about pie anymore. It was about who Grandma really was. And once that truth came out, there would be no going back. The night my aunt revealed what the private investigator had uncovered, the air in the room turned electric. We weren't just bickering relatives anymore, we were detectives, jurors, and executioners all at once. She dropped a manila folder on the dining table with a thud. This, she said, her voice trembling with both triumph and rage, is who Mom really was. And it changes everything. We stared at it like it might bite. My uncle leaned forward first, flipping it open with calloused fingers. Inside were photocopies of old documents, bank slips, letters, faded black and white photos. What is this? He asked, frowning. The investigator had traced Grandma Nora's past, back to her 20s and 30s. What he found shocked all of us. She hadn't just been a quiet homemaker and church volunteer. No, Before she married Grandpa, before she settled into small-town life, she'd been involved with a smuggling ring. Yes. My grandmother. Smuggling. Not drugs, not weapons, spices. Exotic ones. Rare, expensive, and in some cases, completely illegal at the time. Apparently, that mystery spice in her apple pie wasn't some quaint secret ingredient. It was something she'd gotten through shady connections decades ago. A spice banned from import for years due to trade restrictions. She'd kept a stash, hidden away, and used it sparingly all her life. The realization hit us all at once. That's why no one could replicate her pie. That's why Theo's version fell flat. It wasn't just the recipe, it was the contraband spice that made it legendary. My aunt crossed her arms. So while we all thought she was some saintly baker, she was running around with criminals. That's ridiculous, my mom snapped, but her voice shook. No, my uncle growled, jabbing a finger at the documents. It makes sense. I always wondered how she afforded certain things when Dad was struggling. Look at these deposits. Look at the dates. She was making side money off this stuff. Theo sat frozen, his face pale. So you're saying, her pie was illegal? Not the pie, my aunt corrected. The ingredient. Without it, the recipe is just another apple pie. The room buzzed with disbelief, anger, and betrayal. But underneath it all, something darker crept in. If the recipe was tied to Grandma's smuggling past, then whoever controlled it didn't just have a dessert, they had a piece of evidence. Proof of something Grandma clearly wanted buried. My mom stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood. This is why I kept it hidden, she admitted. Her eyes darted between us, desperate. Mom made me promise. She didn't want anyone to know. She didn't want this family dragged through the mud. But instead of understanding, her confession lit the fuse. So you knew? My uncle barked. You knew she was involved in this filth, and you said nothing? I was protecting her, my mom shot back, tears brimming in her eyes. Protecting her, or protecting yourself? My aunt sneered. How long have you been using that spice? Huh? Did she give you her stash? The accusation hung heavy. I never touched it, my mom cried. I kept her secret, that's all. But the suspicion had already poisoned the room. Suddenly, it wasn't about the pie anymore. It was about trust. Who knew what, who benefited, who lied? Theo, who had been quiet until then, spoke up. If the spice is illegal, what happens if the authorities find out? His voice shook. What if they dig into Grandma's past? What if they come after us? That was when true panic set in. In the days that followed, our family fractured completely. My uncle started making calls, trying to verify the PI's findings. He swore that if our family's name got dragged into scandal, he'd cut all ties with anyone involved in hiding it. My aunt doubled down, demanding that my mom hand over the notebook and destroy the evidence before someone outside the family found it. And Theo? He spiraled. His little stunt at the farmer's market had already earned him ridicule, and now he was terrified that he'd accidentally exposed something illegal. He pulled his stall overnight, deleted his posts, and stopped answering calls. Last I heard, he was holed up at his apartment, paranoid that cops were watching him. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop replaying Grandma's letter in my mind. Some traditions are meant to die with us. She hadn't been melodramatic, she'd been warning us. Begging us not to dig deeper. But it was too late. The family started taking sides. My mom and I on one side, trying to honor Grandma's wishes. My aunt and uncle on the other, hell-bent on exposing the truth, or at least controlling it. Theo floating in between, consumed by shame and fear. It got ugly. My uncle threatened to sue my mom if she didn't hand over the notebook. My aunt spread gossip that my mom had inherited Grandma's illegal stash and was secretly profiting from it. At church, whispers followed us down the pews. Neighbors asked questions we didn't know how to answer. And then came the worst part. One evening, after another screaming match over the phone, my mom finally broke down. She pulled me into the kitchen, opened the cupboard above the fridge, and brought down a tin box I'd never seen before. Inside, wrapped in wax paper, was a small glass vial filled with a dark, reddish-brown powder. "This," she whispered, her hands trembling, "is all that's left." My heart stopped. The infamous spice. The one that made Grandma's pie legendary. The one she'd smuggled, hidden, guarded for decades. "Mom," I whispered, "why do you still have this?" She looked at me, her eyes wet with tears. "Because I didn't know what else to do with it. I couldn't throw it away." It felt like throwing her away. But I couldn't use it either. It's just been sitting here all these years. I stared at that vial, feeling the weight of it like a ticking bomb. And I knew, if the rest of the family found out she had it, all hell would break loose. It didn't take long. A week later, my aunt came over unannounced. She barged in, demanding the notebook. When my mom refused, she shoved past her and started tearing through the kitchen, opening drawers, rifling through cupboards. That's when she found the tin box. Her gasp was sharp, triumphant. "I knew it," she hissed, holding the vial up like evidence in a trial. "You've been keeping it all along." "Give that back," my mom shouted, lunging forward, but my aunt clutched it tight, her face twisted with fury. "This proves it," she spat. "You were never protecting Mom. You were protecting yourself. You've been sitting on her dirty little secret this whole time." I tried to intervene, but my uncle arrived minutes later, summoned by my aunt's frantic call. And once he saw the vial, it was over. "This ends now," he said grimly. "We're not covering this up anymore." They stormed out with the vial, leaving my mom collapsed at the table, sobbing. I stood there, numb, realizing the feud had crossed a line we could never uncross. Because now the secret wasn't hidden anymore. It was out in the open. And knowing my aunt and uncle, they wouldn't stop until they used it to burn everything down. If finding out about Grandma's spice stash cracked our family, my aunt walking out of our kitchen with that vial shattered it completely. The next morning, she blasted the news across every channel she could. Not literal news, not yet, but church ladies, neighbors, co-workers, anyone who'd listen. She didn't tell them the full truth, of course. She painted it her way. That my mother had been hoarding Grandma's secret recipe spice, that she'd been sitting on it selfishly for years, and that it was worth thousands if not more. She made it sound like Mom was guarding buried treasure while the rest of us suffered. By the time we showed up at Sunday service, people were whispering behind hymnals, pointing at us like we'd walked in wearing handcuffs. My mom kept her chin high, but I could feel her hand shaking in mine. Afterward, Pastor Jensen pulled her aside. He didn't accuse, but his careful, measured words carried weight. "Anna, if there are things in your family's past that need addressing, best to do it openly before others do it for you." That was when I realized my aunt and uncle weren't just stirring drama anymore. They were building a case. The fight came to a head 2 nights later at a family meeting my uncle demanded. It was supposed to be in his living room, but the atmosphere was more courtroom than home. Theo was there too, jittery and pale, chewing his nails like he wanted to disappear. My aunt sat stiff-backed, clutching the vial in her lap like a holy relic. My uncle stood by the fireplace, voice booming. "This stops being a secret tonight," he declared. "Either you hand over that notebook and admit what you've been hiding, Anna, or we'll take this further." My mom's voice cracked. "Take it where?" "To the authorities," my uncle said flatly. "If Mom was involved in smuggling, if that spice is contraband, we can't keep covering it up. We're accomplices by silence." "She's dead," my mom cried. "Dragging her name through the mud won't change anything." "It'll change the truth," he shot back. "And maybe save us from looking complicit." I couldn't take it anymore. "You don't care about the truth," I snapped. "You just want control. That's all this has ever been about." My aunt glared at me. "Don't talk to me about control. Your mother has been manipulating all of us for years. She had the notebook. She had the spice. She wanted to decide when and how we got the legacy. Legacy? I laughed bitterly. It's spice, Aunt Marie. A sprinkle of history in a pie. You've turned it into a weapon. That's when Theo finally broke. His voice came out high and panicked. We need to stop. Don't you see? This isn't about pie anymore. If people find out, they'll think we're all criminals. We'll be ruined. His hands were shaking so bad he nearly knocked over the lamp beside him. But no one listened. The shouting rose until my uncle slammed his fist on the mantel. Enough. If Anna doesn't hand it over, I swear I'll walk this file down to the police myself. My mom went white as chalk. And I said something I'll never forget. Then maybe I'll go first. The room went silent. I hadn't planned it. The words slipped out of some defiant place in me. But once they were out, I meant them. I was sick of being dragged around by secrets. Sick of watching my family tear itself apart over something none of us even fully understood. My uncle's eyes narrowed. What did you say? I swallowed hard. If you're so sure this is about the law, maybe I'll be the one to hand it in. That way I know the story doesn't get twisted to suit your power trip. The room erupted again, but this time my mom grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the door. We're leaving. And that was the last family meeting we ever had. Word spread faster than wildfire. My aunt's whispers turned into full-blown accusations. She told people Mom had been sitting on stolen goods, that Grandma's legacy was tainted by crime. My uncle started dropping hints at his workplace, framing himself as the righteous one trying to do the right thing. Theo disappeared completely. Phone off, blinds drawn. Last I heard, his landlord said he hadn't left his apartment in days. And then, the cops showed up. 2 officers at our door, polite but firm. They'd received a tip about contraband spices tied to my grandmother's past. They asked questions. My mom denied everything, but the way her hands twisted in her lap gave her away. They didn't arrest her, not yet, but they left with warnings and a promise to follow up. When the door closed, my mom crumbled. She turned on me, tears streaking her face. Are you happy now? You wanted it out in the open? This is what happens. I wanted to argue, but my throat was tight with guilt. I hadn't tipped anyone off. But someone had, and we both knew exactly who. My aunt and uncle. The feud was no longer private. It was public, messy, humiliating. Neighbors avoided us. Church families dropped us from dinner invites. At the grocery store, people glanced at our cart like we were smuggling black market goods between the apples and flour. And then came the betrayal that broke me completely. One evening, scrolling through Facebook, I saw a post that made my stomach turn. A photo of the vial, sitting on my aunt's kitchen counter, alongside a neatly typed caption. This is the spice that made Nora's pie famous. Our family kept it hidden for years, but the truth always comes out. Now the recipe will finally belong to everyone, not just the selfish few. Hundreds of comments. Some praising her courage. Others gossiping about criminal pies. Local reporters tagging themselves in. It was a circus. I stormed to her house that night, pounding on the door until she opened it with that smug, righteous look. How could you? I hissed. Her lips curled. I'm doing what your mother never had the guts to do. I'm setting the story free. You're destroying us, I shot back. No, she said coldly. Your mother destroyed us the day she chose secrecy over family. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to rip the vial out of her hands and smash it into the ground. But instead, I walked away, chest hollow, knowing there was no saving us. Because the feud wasn't private anymore. It belonged to the whole town. And with the police circling, with reporters sniffing, with trust obliterated, the only thing left was collapse. A week later, the police returned. This time with a warrant. They searched the house, every drawer, every closet. They questioned my mom for hours. And though they didn't find anything beyond the notebook, the humiliation was complete. Word spread, whispers turned to headlines, and we became the family known not for tradition but for scandal. And then came the knock I'll never forget. Theo. Gaunt, eyes bloodshot, voice trembling. He shoved past me into the kitchen and collapsed into a chair. "It's worse," he whispered. "What is?" I asked. He looked up, his face pale and broken. Grandma's spice stash wasn't just contraband. It was stolen. And now the people it belonged to, they know. Theo looked like a ghost. His shirt hung loose, his cheeks hollowed, his eyes darting around my kitchen like he expected someone to crawl out of the cupboards. "Stolen," he whispered again. His voice cracked. It wasn't just spice Grandma was hiding. She took it. Took it from people who don't forget debts. My chest tightened. "Theo, slow down. Who are you talking about?" He dragged his hands through his greasy hair. "I've been digging. I wanted answers. And I found them. Grandma didn't get that spice through smuggling like we thought. She lifted it from a supplier connected to men who don't deal in pies and church fundraisers. Men who deal in other things." My mom froze across the room. Her hands gripped the back of a chair so hard her knuckles turned white. "That's not possible. My mother wouldn't." "She would," Theo cut in, his voice trembling. "She did. I traced names. Shipping manifests. Grandma intercepted a shipment. Took part of it. And they've been missing it ever since." I swallowed hard. "How do you know they're still looking for it?" Theo's laugh was broken, humorless. "Because one of them knocked on my door yesterday." The silence that fell was suffocating. My mom sagged into the chair, her lips parted in shock. I gripped the counter to steady myself. Theo's voice dropped to a rasp. He knew my name. He knew I was her grandson. Said they'd been waiting a long time for the truth to come out. And now that it has, they'll be collecting. Collecting. The word chilled me. I wanted to tell him he was paranoid, that it was just coincidence, that no one cared about jars of spice decades old. But then I remembered the vial, glowing amber under my aunt's kitchen light. The way reporters swarmed her post. The way the police lingered with questions they couldn't answer. This wasn't coincidence. It was a beacon. And now the wrong people had seen it. The feud that had once been whispers at family dinners was now a wildfire burning beyond our control. My aunt had wanted exposure, my uncle had wanted justice, but what we got was something far darker, danger. The first sign came that weekend. Our mailbox ripped off its post. Tires slashed in the driveway. No note, no signature, just silent warnings that whoever Grandma had crossed was still watching. My mom begged me to stay inside. My aunt insisted she'd done the right thing by revealing the spice, but her hands shook as she bolted her doors at night. My uncle tried to act tough, walking around with a bat, but I saw the fear in his eyes every time a car slowed near the house. And Theo? Theo unraveled. He called me 3-4 times a night, whispering about shadows under his window, about footsteps on the stairs of his apartment. He said he could hear Grandma's name being muttered, low and threatening, outside his door. I didn't believe half of it, until the night he showed up on our porch again, clutching a note. For words, scrawled in black marker. It was never yours. That was when I knew we weren't feuding over pie anymore. We were feuding over survival. And survival was something our family had never been good at. The tipping point came at what I'll forever call the Last Supper. My mom, desperate for unity, invited everyone back to her house one more time. She begged. If we don't stand together now, they'll pick us off one by one. Reluctantly, they came. My aunt with her tight smile, my uncle with his suspicious glare, Theo trembling like a leaf. Dinner was tense. Forks clinked like gunshots. Every word was measured, every glance barbed. Finally, my mom broke the silence. We have to get rid of it. The notebook. The vial. All of it. My aunt stiffened. That spice is history. It's a curse, my mom said sharply. And as long as it exists, they'll keep coming. We burn it, we bury it, whatever it takes, we end this. My uncle shook his head. You think they'll just forget because we tossed some powder in the wind? They want restitution. Payment. And how do you propose we give them that? I snapped. We can't exactly write a check to criminals. The argument rose like thunder, voices crashing, accusations flying. My aunt accused my mom of cowardice. My uncle accused her of hoarding. Theo begged them all to stop, his voice breaking. And then the window shattered. A brick, wrapped in paper, landed in the middle of the table. Glass sprayed across our plates. My mom screamed. Theo ducked. My uncle lunged for the brick and tore the paper off. Scrawled in jagged letters. Return what was stolen. Or we take what can't be replaced. The feud was no longer between us. It was us versus them. But instead of uniting, it fractured us deeper. My aunt packed up that night, vowing to hide the spice where Anna can't ruin it. My uncle declared he'd handle things his way, storming out with the brick still clutched in his hand. Theo collapsed on the couch, sobbing, muttering that we were doomed. And me? I realized the truth. The feud no one saw coming wasn't just about us. It was about inheritance, about secrets, about debts unpaid and sins unburied. And we were too broken to fight it together. The end came 2 weeks later. A fire. It started in my aunt's garage, where she'd been storing boxes. By the time firefighters arrived, the whole place was an inferno. She and my uncle escaped, coughing and blistered, but the garage, and everything inside, was ash. The notebook. The vial. Grandma's legacy. Gone. Some called it an accident. Others whispered it was a warning. My aunt swore she saw figures in the smoke, silhouettes watching from across the street. All I know is that the spice was gone, and with it, the last tether to the feud that destroyed us. But the damage remained. Theo never recovered. He moved states away, changed his number, disappeared into a life of shadows. My aunt and uncle stopped speaking to us entirely. My mom carried the weight of it like a stone in her chest, shrinking into someone smaller, someone quieter. And me? I tell this story not because it has closure, but because it doesn't. Because feuds don't always end with apologies or forgiveness. Sometimes they end with silence, with ashes, with families scattered like dust. Sometimes they end with a truth too heavy to ever put down. That the people you thought you knew best are strangers once secrets crack them open. And that the feud no one saw coming? It never really ends. It just changes shape. Families are supposed to be bound by love, trust, and loyalty. But sometimes, it's the smallest secrets that tear the deepest cracks. A recipe. A vial of spice. A legacy twisted by betrayal. Was Grandma's secret ever really worth it? You decide.